What is going on, Tentacrew? So, the Mortal Shell beta has just ended, and I think it's time to talk about my opinions and what the team at Cold Symmetry have created for us. And I'm going to be honest with you, Mortal Shell is a Souls-like that I nearly wrote off. But before we get into that, I would just like to ask if you are enjoying this video or any of the other videos that I do and would like to see more Mortal Shell or Souls-like content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Maybe even let me know what you thought of the beta or my review in the comments below. But now that the formalities are out of the way, let's dive in. By the end of my first playthrough of the beta, I found myself no longer enjoying the game, and just wanting to complete it, to say that I did move on. A 4.5 out of 8 would have been a generous rating, as while many of the game's aspects I enjoyed thoroughly, the flaws were so glaring, and some aspects I just found anti-fun. But even through all of this, there was still something gnawing at me. Something that felt like it was missing, or something that I was glossing over. That nagging suspicion is what drove me to give the beta another playthrough. So the next morning I fired it back up, and played through it again. And it made me realize the game wasn't the problem. It was your boy. Much as the same way many who went into Sekiro felt, playing through this game with a dodge-centered playstyle like how you would a Dark Souls is a surefire way to dislike this game. The first aspect that this game teaches you is hardening. This game's unique system that makes the rest of the combat cycle make a lot more sense. The fact that it's the first thing the game teaches you should have hit home the importance of this feature, but for some reason I glossed over it, assuming that how I wanted to play would suffice. I've never been a fan of shields and Souls-likes, often opting to forego them completely, or if I do use them, it's just for parries or one of the passive effects that the shields give. So going into this game, I saw it as just another block ability, and wrote it off because if I can dodge the damage completely, why would I want to risk blocking? But that playstyle just simply won't fly this time. Dodging is limited to a two-part move, a sidestep followed by a roll, and on paper this seems fine. Add the fact that iframes seem to be limited, and things start to get a little bit more concerning. Dodging also must be timed preemptively, as it seems like if you try to dodge on reaction, the windup for the iframes to kick in will take too long and you'll end up getting hit, and thanks to how both you and enemies recoil from most hits you take, one hit often turns into multiple. The final nail in the coffin for a dodge-focused combat loop is the fact that your attacks carry a large amount of weight with them, and are quite long in animation, which feels very satisfying when they connect and will cause enemies to recoil. But eventually, most enemies will power through your combo to retaliate. This is where dodging would come into play on any other Souls-like but Mortal Shell. But in Mortal Shell, if you are locked into an attack animation, dodging will not break it. So what is a player to do? The answer is to act like a virgin who snuck one of his dad's Viagras, harden up, and get ready for an amazing experience. So in the bottom left corner of the screen is the Harden meter, and when it's full, you can hold the left trigger to put yourself into an invincible hardened state. You are unable to move or queue any movement-based abilities such as attack or a dodge during this time, but you are able to enter this state in the middle of any animation, whether it be attacking, dodging, or in the middle of you being recoiled from being struck. You remain hardened for as long as you hold the button, or until you get hit with enough damage that breaks you out of the harden. After you break out, whatever animation you were doing before hardening will then complete. So if you got hit and panic harden, you'll finish your stun animation. And if you are in the middle of a thrust, the thrust will happen immediately after you break out. This is all balanced by hardening being on a cooldown that starts after you break out. So the reason that I've spent so much time on this aspect of the game is because how genuinely impressive such a simple mechanic can be and how so easily it can be overlooked. Mortal Shell favors an aggressive playstyle, and hardening creates a certain ebb and flow, allowing you to stay aggressive while tactically choosing moments to break, just for the flow of combat to instantly be continued as soon as the harden fades. Healing is another unique system that is benefited by staying in your enemy's face. Healing items can be found around, but most of them, from what I found, were minor heals at the cost of a resource, or a slow heal over time. And the primary way the game wants you to heal in combat is through the game's parry system. While attacking, there's a bar above your HP that will fill, and while you are out of combat, that bar will fade unless you have completed one of the segments. Each shell has a different amount of segments, and these bars serve two functions, one of which is being able to riposte after a parry, causing you to steal health from an enemy. Unlike other Souls-likes, they do not have a refillable healing item, and this system forces you to stay aggressive if you want a chance on healing later, which plays into the over-combat system created here. And this combat system carries the game so far, because unfortunately from what I saw with the two areas of the demo, the environments are not that rememberable, with the first area being your standard forest area similar to what you've seen in countless action RPGs of the past, and the second coming to a catacomb area of tunnels and dead ends. But while uninspired, the areas are done well, and with the exploration these areas give you, it gives you enough reason for you to search all the routes instead of just rushing through. Music is much of the same, with the tracks giving enough ambience to the areas while never really standing out on their own up until the boss fight, which, I will say, is one of the worst boss tracks I have ever heard in a game. It's just a loud, droning, monotonous track, and it did nothing for me besides force me to turn down the volume. Shall we? This music though, why is it so fucking loud? Why is that so fucking loud? I couldn't think. World building wise though, they follow the path of lore being fed to the player through item descriptions and environmental cues, but take it even a step further than what Dark Souls does. Items in the world do not tell you what they do until you use one, and world items respawn on a timer, allowing for farming if a player wants to, not only for the effects of the item, but for the fact that the more you use the same type of item, the familiarity of that item increases. This can give you extra lore pieces about the item, increases the effects, or even change the effects of the item completely. For example, there is a mushroom that can be found that the first time you eat it, poisons you horribly and you'll most likely die to it. But then, every mushroom of that type that you eat after that gives you poison immunity. This can also be seen in the reusable items, like your guitar skills and the amount of songs you can play on the lute increasing the more times you practice. I'm really interested to see how far they can push this system and continue to reward the player for thorough exploration and being willing to try items over and over just to see how they can change. It's really, really neat and very unique. Characters' designs are also a huge contrast to a lot of Souls-like games, and I feel this is due to how close the camera follows compared to others. This closer camera allows for more detail to be put into each character, something that would have simply been wasted in other games unless the enemies are significantly larger than the player character. From the player's shells, to the swine merchant and tar mom, to even the most basic of grunt enemies, there's a variation in looks and appearance, and you can tell a great deal of detail was put into the models, and it's these aspects that let me overlook some of the drab environments because they clearly want the focus to be on the shells and what the shell is fighting. Glitches were fairly few and far between, with the only noticeable one I had being an enemy doing what looked like a Fallout 76 stretched-limbed abomination for a second, right before it corrected itself and the fight continued. Lastly, let's cover the boss, the Enslaved Grisha. Design-wise, I'm a fan, even if many that I have talked to are not. It is a refreshing take on a large monster-type enemy that could have very well just been another large troll or ogre, so the design-wise, it's a plus for me. The fight is straightforward, and you can tell this is going to be one of the first fights you face in the game, if not the very first. And I've always been more of a fan of demos and betas to give us some middle game content than to just throw us into the first area. Or if they do give us the first area, change the boss, like how Dark Souls 3 had the Dancer of the Boreal Valley as the demo boss, or Dark Souls 2 with the Looking Glass Knight. Regardless of this boss's placement in the game, the boss seemed on the easier side of things once you are accustomed to the hardening system, and is punishingly difficult if you ignore the hardening system. For one, its attacks tend to either be wide sweeps or long thrusts and jumps, and come out at a speed that makes it very difficult to dodge alone. Secondly, he tends to attack in threes, and since the dodge is always set up to double, the third strike will almost always hit you on recovery unless you dodge far away from him. Using the hardening system though, you can bait out the combo of your choice, jump in for some attacks, and then depending on what he does next, harden immediately or dodge away the first part of the combo and then harden at the second part, allowing you to stay in the fray a lot longer than you would expect. The aggression is rewarded as well, with the boss being able to be staggered off its feet after enough abuse, allowing you to fell this boss in probably 3 to 4 cycles of stamina if managed correctly. And the RNG is on your side. I say RNG because after the attack where it slams its face into the ice, it will cause icicles to fall from the ceiling. These fall at random points and give no indication that I could see on where they are going to fall, lending to some frustrating moments of getting staggered out of a combo or even getting killed post-fight to them, as they continue to fall even after the boss is dead. This aspect could easily be remedied though by a shadow on the ground indicating where they will be falling, and I hope the frustration from this by the community is heard and altered to be a bit more fair, as I think the concept is great, it's just very poorly executed at this point. Overall, falling ice aside, it's an enjoyable boss, but I do hope that this is the first boss of the game, because if not, I fear boss difficulty may be too easy. With bosses being a major selling point of Souls-like titles, if not the biggest selling point to these games, an easy demo boss always leaves me just a little bit concerned. But the demo as a whole checks a lot of the right boxes for me. The combat system alone is enough to carry a lot of the game, and it's obvious that this is where they spent the bulk of their time. While the areas may be generic, they are small enough and have enough secrets to make them enjoyable to explore without becoming annoying to trek through. Enemy design is top tier both in aesthetics and the differing movesets and approaches you need to take for each one. And while there are a few instances of frustration, such as the falling ice or how long it takes for you to stand up after getting knocked over, as well as how standing up gives you no invincibility frames, the combat experience is already excellent and can only be improved through polishing of some animations. Music is probably the weakest aspect of the game for me, considering that silence may have been a better choice for some areas, but that is just my taste, and other than the boss fight track, did not hinder my enjoyment. Overall, Mortal Shell in its current state made me want to instantly press forward past the tutorial, and I'm looking forward to see how the game fully improves on what has already been shown, as well as what new secrets come to us in the form of new shells, weapons, enemies, and items. In the Tentacrew, we grade games on a 1 to 8 tentacle scale, and this game in its current state gets a solid 6.5 tentacles up from me. The experience is unique, and a breath of fresh air to a genre that is becoming more and more saturated with by-the-book Souls clones, and I feel already that Mortal Shell has dug out its spot in the genre. The full game is set to release in September of 2020 on the Epic Games Store, and will be released on Steam in September 2021, due to a very questionable Epic Games exclusivity deal. And while this may deter some, I feel Souls fans worth their weight in Estus would be hollow to not give this game a try. Thank you again for watching, Tentacrew. Much love.